Alright, I'm pretty excited for this one. If you keep up with my channel at all, you may have noticed that last week I posted a Korean short rib recipe, or galbichim. What I wanted to do this week was, yes, drop my recipe for French/American braised short ribs, but with the timing of making these two, I figured why not taste them side by side. I made the galbichim for my friends who had just had a baby, and my family wanted American-style braised short ribs for Christmas. So I made these within days of each other, so it was a really good opportunity for the side by side. These side-by-side taste tests are a really good way to pick up on the small differences between similar dishes. It's a really common method used in recipe testing. Now logistically, it's not the easiest thing for a home cook like me to do when this isn't my profession or anything and I don't have unlimited resources. So with it being the holidays, I didn't want to pass up on this opportunity. You can obviously already look up my galbichim recipe in its own video, which I'm going to link in the cards and in the description below, but I'll breeze through the method here just to have a comparison. You basically soak your short ribs for an hour and then boil off the impurities for 5 minutes, which you then dump them into a Dutch oven with all your flavorings and seasonings. You bring that to a boil and then lower it to a simmer, and throughout the braise you add your vegetables like radish and carrots, as well as other elements like chestnuts and dates. Finally, I boiled my sauce down into a glaze and then just serve this over some rice. But moving on to the American style braised short ribs, which I will detail in this video. I made a really large portion because we had a lot of people eating it and I just wanted to have some leftovers, but you can divide this accordingly. I started the day before with about 8 pounds of bone-in short ribs. Again, these are the plate cut style as opposed to the flanken cut style. I also try to find these smaller square cut ribs.
Small boys.
I had these frozen already from a previous purchase. You can see the newer ones I bought are a little longer and a little more rectangular, which is fine, but I just prefer to have more servings per pound because we serve these whole. Anyway, what I like to do is dry brine these overnight to start. It just internally seasons them and gives them a better mired reaction when we sear them tomorrow. So I'm generously going around all sides of each one with a lot of kosher salt and then laying them onto a baking sheet with a rack on top. This allows the air to go all around the short rib and lets it dry out overnight. I also felt like prepping my vegetables the night before just to give me less to do on Christmas Day. So I have here 2 medium yellow onions, about 1.5 pounds of carrots, 6 stalks of celery, and about 10 cloves of garlic. I'm just going to dice all of these up. I don't want too big of pieces like we did in the Korean short rib video. Just like a medium dice is fine because I want all of these to kind of melt into the gravy that we're going to make. But if you like bigger chunks of vegetables, feel free to do that. I just combine all these into a large bowl and then cover it in plastic wrap to leave overnight. And then I also press my garlic into a separate bowl because that's going to be added in later to the braise. And one last thing the night before is to prep my herbs. So I have here some bunches of oregano, thyme, rosemary, and parsley, which I've divided into 2 separate parts because I'm going to be cooking this in 2 separate pots. If you're making a smaller portion, you only need to do this in 1 bunch. But I like to go in with some kitchen twine and then wrap all these up individually first and then tie them into their own bunches together because that just makes it easier to remove from the pot when it's done. Okay, with that out of the way, on to cooking day. I'm first going to pull these short ribs out of the fridge and you can see how much they've dried out. It's going to give us a really nice crust, which is going to add a lot of flavor. To enhance that even more, I'm going to cover these in some freshly ground black pepper, press that in all around, and then I'm going to take some all-purpose flour and then coat each one in that. I always do this for my American style short ribs. The flour is going to kind of make a roux with the fat, which is going to thicken up the sauce, and it just adds that much more flavor. You don't need to spend too much time like you're cooking chicken wings or something. Just lightly roll the short ribs around in the flour until they're fairly coated. And to sear, like I said, I have this going in 2 separate Dutch ovens, but I'm just going to show you the bigger one. You can get some neutral oil, or I have this beef tallow from the 4th of July when I made a brisket. It's finally the special occasion that I was waiting for to use it. Just spooning some of that out into the pot and letting it get hot, and then we're going to sear the short ribs in batches. You can fill up most of the pot, just don't double layer it, and then give them about a minute on each side and try to get browning around all the edges. This kind of mired reaction is what you're looking for. Take your time with this, but don't let it burn on the bottom. If you do see a spot about to burn, you can grab a short rib and rub it around to release it. But yeah, once you have all your batches done, you should have some brown short ribs and then some fond on the bottom of your pot, which before it burns, you should quickly add your vegetables that are already chopped. Everything but the garlic, that is. And then using a wooden spoon, you try to coat the vegetables in the fond on the bottom and then release all that with the liquid inside the vegetables. You're just trying to soften these over high heat for a period of about 10 minutes. They don't need to be completely soft, just have some color around the edges and then become translucent. After about 10 minutes, I'm going to add my garlic and let that bloom for like 2 to 3 minutes. Just be careful because this stuff does burn. And then I'm going to go in with the equivalent of a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. This is super essential to me with braised dishes. It brings a special depth of flavor, especially when it's toasted with the fond on the bottom before deglazing. Just kind of spread that around and let it mat itself to the bottom. Lastly, I'm just adding in 4 beef bouillon cubes. You could omit this and just add beef stock instead of water later. I just keep these cubes around because they last a lot longer. This is getting closer and closer to burning at this point, so just be really careful. And before it does burn, I grab a bottle of red wine. Any wine should do, I think. I just grabbed one from the grocery store. And I like to just add a little bit so I can still see the bottom so I know what parts of the fond I still need to wipe up. Just scraping that up with my wooden spoon before adding in the rest of the bottle. Red wine and beef go so well together, and this is why this is one of my favorite dishes. Then I'm adding in my tied up herbs, and then all of my seared short ribs. This is the only time that I use the word nestle, but we're going to nestle these in. Try to even them out. You can definitely stack them on top of each other at this point. Just make sure that they're fairly level. I'm just going to add enough water, or if we didn't use bouillon cubes, beef stock, to go about halfway up the ribs. I wouldn't completely cover them because this is going to be covered when it's braising, so you don't have too much risk of the ribs drying out. I'm also adding in 3 bay leaves and just kind of stirring everything around to bring everything more even. Then I just take a few minutes to bring this up to a boil and then immediately drop it to a low simmer. And then I'm covering this, and I prefer to braise these in the oven because I feel like the heat is more even in there. So I set my oven to like 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and then both of my Dutch ovens go in. I'm going to check this about an hour and a half in, and you can see that the beef is still not very tender, but that sauce is thickening up and becoming really flavorful looking. I do like to take a spoon and baste the tops of the short ribs that are exposed, just to let them absorb some of that glazed flavor. You can also rearrange them and turn them over as needed, but back into the oven these go until everything is tender, which for me pretty consistently takes around 3 hours total. And you can check with a paring knife, which is what I always do to make sure. I don't want these to fall completely off the bone, but I want them to be almost there. You definitely don't want anything really rubbery, so take your time with it. At this point, these were ready well before we were going to eat, but I just put these in an oven set to its lowest temperature, around 170 Fahrenheit, and they'll be good to go for many hours until you eat. Before I was ready to serve them, I did grab a spoon and try to skim off the fat on the top. The short ribs are really fatty, and we added a lot of beef tallow or neutral oil, so there's a pretty significant amount of fat sitting on top of this gravy. But that's about it. I had these with my family on Christmas, and they came out really good. Of course, I saved some to serve up for my taste test, and I always eat these with some garlic mashed potatoes on the bottom. That gravy goes amazingly with the potatoes. The vegetables just soften up and absorb all that flavor. This is a really rich and heavenly dish. But like I said, the taste test here is going to be a side-by-side. So I took my last serving of caibichim and served that over some rice, and warmed that up and put it next to my American braised short ribs over the mashed potatoes. This looks amazing, and I can't wait to see what the differences are. Let's get into it. It's kind of hard to plan something like this, especially for me. 2 deeply concentrated dishes that take a lot of time and patience, but it is the holidays and I have a little extra time, so I thought this was a great idea. I already tried the caibichim on camera in its own video, and I also already ate these braised short ribs yesterday, but not on camera, so I'm going to start with those. Get a little bit of the vegetables and mashed potatoes on that as well. Cheers. As tender and savory as ever. Short ribs can be pretty tough if you don't cook them right, but man, if you take the time, they're just the most amazing, delectable cut of meat out there. The gravy in this really adds that extra depth of flavor, especially when paired with buttery mashed potatoes. It's the best. But as a reminder, let's go back to the caibichim. Here we go. So amazing how the same cut of meat can just be prepared in such a different way. They're both braised, but the flavor profile is so vastly different. But the common thread that you have between these is that fatty but tender, juicy meat. Some of the best beef flavor that you can get out of any cut of meat. It's really interesting to compare these side by side. You can have tasted both of them in separate settings, but it's hard to really compare them unless you have them right in front of you. And I don't get to do this often. I don't know if I can really pick a winner here, but I can say that the gravy on this American style is really hard to beat. The red wine and then the beef broth flavor, they just mix so well together. But the beef itself in the Korean style just feels like it absorbs the seasonings a little better. There's a little more going on with the soy sauce and then the sweetenings that we put on top of it. Not to say that the American style is under-seasoned, but it is a little more basic with just salt and pepper. I could be in the mood for either of these on a given day, but I would never be upset if any of these was put in front of me. But now you have recipes for both of these if you'd like to try it. Definitely a good special occasion type of thing, but I probably won't be making short ribs for a little while now because I've just gone through so many of them. But if you've had either of these, or if you have any thoughts, let me know down below. As always, thank you guys for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. The carrot too, that's essential to both of them.